Let's look at a clip from Amanda Seale's recent appearance on Jubilee, where a participant tries to refute her claim that reparations for Black Americans are just and necessary by using the model minority myth.
For example, we have the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. We prevented Chinese people from getting citizenship and even entering the country. We discriminated against them and basically put them under apartheid, even here in the United States. Yet they have the highest median household income. How is that possible? How come they don't complain and feel entitled?
Now, usually, clarifying the record on the model minority myth involves pointing to the significant wealth gap among Asian Americans, the need to disaggregate data to look at varying Asian American ethnicities and backgrounds, as well as the significant role that the H-1B visa program plays in Asian American income. However, the simplest approach to exposing the flaw in that participant's particular use of the model minority myth is to simply ask what percentage of Chinese Americans today are survivors or descendants of the exclusion era versus what percentage of Black Americans today are survivors or descendants of the Jim Crow era. And the answer is significantly less than 10% of Chinese Americans versus significantly more than 90% of Black Americans. And that tells us a couple of things. One is that a reason why you may not hear Chinese Americans talk a lot about the Chinese Exclusion Act is that for 90% of Chinese Americans today, the Exclusion Act is no part of their ancestral history. For example, I am one of the less than 10%, and you do hear me talk about it. And the other thing is that high median income of Chinese Americans today cannot be used as an indicator of success or resilience or lack of harmful impact on survivors and descendants of Chinese exclusion when over 90% of those Chinese American income earners were not impacted by Chinese exclusion. And for an example that people might be able to connect to on a personal level, in 1885, over 200 Chinese American residents of Tacoma were rounded up and forcibly expelled, and their property was destroyed in what became known as the Tacoma Method that was replicated in towns across the West. Over a century later, a foundation was formed to engage in the process of acknowledgement and reconciliation for the harm caused during the Tacoma Chinese expulsion. But after a decade-long search, no descendants of the Tacoma Chinese could be found, whereas there are still 2 living survivors of the Tulsa massacre and destruction of Black Wall Street, and they are still fighting for compensation. And finally, I want to make clear that I am not contrasting the relatively few Chinese American survivors and descendants to the large number of Black American survivors and descendants to say that reparation should be an issue of scale. I do not believe that a large number of people have to be harmed in order for reparations to be warranted. I am pointing it out to illustrate why today's Chinese American community does not seem to place particular importance on the Chinese Exclusion Act.